morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10 to all of those watching and sending questions. My name is Richard Charpentier. I'm a bakery influencer with Bakerpedia. And every Tuesday we gather here to answer questions that are sent from the bakers and answered here every week. So let's get started. So our first question comes from someone who wants to know what would be the cause of cracks on the side, tear in bread, and how to fix it. So there could be several things, but overall, in my opinion, and I'm referring to, for those, if you look at the loaf of bread and you look at the break and shred on the side, it should be even and not a big break, but it should be a separation, basically in the oven spring. So what you're getting a lot of oven spring, a lot of release, and it cracks the bread. So I'll go through several potential problems that would create that, but again, not knowing your bakery, to start with, a dough can be undermixed, and by undermixing the dough, your gluten network is still not fully developed, so and a little rough. So as you go into a hot oven, especially if you bake any artisanal bread, it will just pop open. The second thing could be you're underproofed, and it could be a switch of flour. As we're switching flour now, your flour needs a little more proofing, or maybe needs a little more yeast. So, and once you go into a hot oven, so if it's underproof, it tends to not, expand properly, and therefore would crack. And there's also the potential that you're underhydrated. Underhydration will cause that. So it's basically holding on your protein. It comes back to your protein. And often it's never one, it's often all of the other factors, all of the above. And it could be, what changed into your bakery? What are you doing? But I suggest you start mixing a little longer or change your hydration. If you can put an extra 0.5%, maybe 1% of water, and mix a little longer. What is your protein content? And if it's a new flour, go contact your flour distributor or your miller and ask, hey, what are you seeing and how to best correct it? If for those who have available, farinographs or mixographs, go get data and try to translate it to how can you use those data to better correct the flour in your bakery and to potentially reduce any issues, because it's important to create consistent product. But excellent question, so thank you for sending it. So now to our next question. It's about sourdough bread, and as someone, they say they've been making a sourdough bread and they switched to a new flour, the new crop, hard wheat flour that they always used, very high protein content. But now, once they make their sourdough, they get very little oven spring and very little expansion. So what could it be? So there's a lot, again, similar to the question before. Again, it's a paper exercise, so it's difficult to pinpoint and just say this is because of that, this is because of these. So on a sourdough, you're dealing with a wild culture, a starter. So I'm assuming, have you changed feeding? Now you're feeding your starter with a new flour. If that's so, it could also be the activity of your flour, meaning not enough food available. Is this a whole wheat flour? Is this the refined flour where the bran and the germs have been removed? As the temperature changed, now we're entering the colder month. Based on where you are located, it could be that as well, but I'm sure you've thought of it. uh, as changing crops, all flour, unless if it's a whole wheat, but all wheat is technically the same. It contains carbohydrates and protein and other mineral contents and ashes. And if it's a whole grain, then you're getting all the bran and the germ into it, which is more food, and it creates another complexity for your sourdough. I would suggest, maybe trying to go a little warmer. Does your flour not have enough, starch damage, which becomes available food as well for the yeast to convert. So a lot of different factors will come in place in order to truly pinpoint why your sourdough, because a sourdough bread is completely 100% dependent on the health of your starter sourdough. So if your starter sourdough has changed, and one point to look at as well is look at the pH of the new flour. It shouldn't really vary, but I have in my own professional experience seen changes in pH with wheat or hard wheat flour. Sometimes, based on the miller, there could be, and if it's a slight change that could affect your starter, but it's understanding why is your starter not liking it. And maybe start feeding, if you still have the old flour, start feeding your sourdough with the old flour, which was giving you good result. And you need to make sure that your starter is fully active once going into the dough, because flour alone should technically not affect you that much, unless, of course, the sourdough starter has, health problems. So I hope it helps. And again, if you need more help and more support, Bakerpedia website, there's the bakery resources. You can get consultant to basically for 30 minutes or an hour to chat with you and to better understand your problem and how to best solve it. Thank you for sending the question. And now for today, for our last question, is someone wants to know about they acquired a bread molder, with the rolls and the boards and then the long, bread molder. And they're saying that they're having a lot of issues and the shape does not look good and they're looking for help. Well, first thing is go ask the manufacturer of that molder for any specific tips to use it. But most of the bread molders are the same principle. You would take a piece of dough that will go through two rolls that will flatten it, and it will travel through and start curling it to roll it. And then you can regulate your pressure based on the board and then the length, and you have the guide rails to see how long you want to go. Those are used for bread pan to go into the pan. So you don't want to be too long, you don't want to be too short, and you're trying to be as even all the way across. So you don't want any bones where it's thin in the center and thick on the sides. So it takes a little bit of trial and error and learning how to use a molder to be well. But remember, it also starts with the dough. So if you acquired a new bread molder and you were used to shaping either by hand or shaping with a different type of molder, not the table that you're referring to, I would also suggest to start thinking about maybe mixing time could help, because maybe your dough, it's a lot of stress and shear going through a molder. So it's recommended that maybe, your hydration might be, again, not knowing what the finished result that you're seeing and why you say it doesn't look good, but try to correct it. What you have in your disposal is mix time, water content, plus or minus. And again, I'm not asking to go huge shift. I'm talking 0.5%, maybe 1% top. And if we're dealing with new crop as well, and try, do you have enough rest? I know that when we had issues with dough not molding well, then we give it about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes of floor time to really allow for the protein to nicely relax and then easier to go and mold the bread. So I hope it helps. Thank you for sending your questions and thank you for watching Tuesday 10 at 10 and happy baking. And I will see you next week. Thank you.